Tessa Kriesel is the founder of Built for Devs, where she helps DevTools with GTM. She's previously held senior DevRel positions at Snap and Twitter. Today we talk about doing a one-day sprint that will massively accelerate your go-to-market.
And it is so enlightening as a founder to watch someone else actually try to use your tool, because you think that you understand and you see it because you're in it every single day and you're using it all the time, but we're using it as like ourselves. We're not using it as the developer.
I guess the first question is like, why should anyone think about like trying to do something in a day?
Yes. That is a really good question. So as I started building out my business, I was pitching sort of a 4-week program, right? We'd break down sort of the different aspects of bringing together a DevRel program and just, understanding their developers, right? And it just wasn't landing. And so I had this advice to bring together, what could I offer in a day? And if you go out and Google it, it's actually things that consultants and other people have tried. And so they call it VIP day or something in that range. And so I tried it and I brought what I do over 4 weeks. I'm like, how can I do this in a day? Right. And I crunched it down. I brought into a day. And I pitched it to a few people and they're like, yes. And I was like, wait a minute, this is the same services, but it's now in a day. What's different? And after I thought about it, it's like, we're all so busy, right? Especially dev tool founders, so busy trying to balance all the things between the resources and the time and everything that needs your attention. And so that's what ended up happening, right? I started capturing feedback and they're like, going to a meeting here and going to a meeting there and having coaching session here and a session here, that's all great, right? But like, how does this all fit into a bigger picture? And how do I get to that end result when I need to? And looking at it in a day, they're like, I can get what I need at the end of a day. Like if I can just dedicate one day, block out my calendar for a day, I get the results I need. And I'm like, yes, you do. So we can block out a day in our calendars to get something done, but it's much harder to continually block time and continually chip away at working at something.
Yeah. What are typically like the results that people get out of, because, a day is a short space of time, right? Like business, Rome wasn't built in a day. Like what can people realistically expect to get out of a day? What kind of things can change?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, if you're an enterprise company and you're trying to build your DevRel strategy for the next 90 days, you could maybe do that in a day. And I think that's sort of the objective, right? Of what I just shared there is that in a day, it's not a lot of time. And if depending on the dynamics and where you're at with your dev tool and how much you've been talking to developers already, there might be a lot of work that goes into improving developer experience before we could go to market, for example. But when you think about it and say, no, we're going to focus on the next 90 days, right? A quarter. What do we get done this quarter? What is our high level objective? And how do we focus on that high level objective to get it done? Because another thing that tends to happen is that when we're in this space and we're building something, we're like, okay, it can be this for this person and this for this person and this for this person. When at the end of the day, when you look at it like that, you're spreading yourself too thin and you're trying to go after too much. And so it's like 90 days. Who is it that we're going after? What is this very fine-tuned use case? And at the end of it, you have this strategy that tells you exactly what you're going to do, why you're going to do it over the next 90 days, and how that's going to meet the objective. And in most cases, in early stage dev tools, as you can assume, right? You know better than me as a podcast, host of an amazing podcast, like they need adoption. They need developers to find that tool. And so when they're in that early stage, they're not only validating how and where they find developers to use their tool, but they're also validating, am I building the right thing? Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
And so there are less challenges in this earlier stage. Feels like it's complicated, but from a DevRel sense, right, there are less challenges. And so in a day, we are able to work through and just discuss those different pieces because we're not looking at an extremely complicated product with 5 SDKs and 4 different types of APIs or something, right? You're in those early stages, so we can get a lot done in a day.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. At some point, you're going to land a big customer and they're going to ask you for enterprise features. That's where WorkOS comes in because they give you these features out the box. Features like skim provisioning, SAML authentication, and audit logs. They have an easy-to-use API, and they're trusted by big dev tools like Vercel, as well as smaller, fast-growing dev tools like Knock. So if you're looking to cross the enterprise chasm and make yourself enterprise-ready, check out WorkOS. We've also done an episode with Michael, the founder of WorkOS, where he shares a lot of tips around crossing the enterprise chasm, landing your first enterprise deals, and making sure that you're ready for them. Thanks WorkOS for sponsoring the podcast, and back to the show.
From like an outside perspective, the value that I see of just like setting aside a day to do this sort of thing is that I think that most of that work is kind of like painful, uncomfortable, like going and asking people to like try your thing, to ask what problems they have. And it's the sort of thing that's really easy to procrastinate on, but actually is going to define whether you succeed or not. And otherwise you're just doing loads of busy work. But it's very easy to put it off because like you're trying to scale up your service. You've got some existing users, like, you know, there's so many things to do. And this stuff is not like urgent in the sense of you could get away with pushing it to next week. But if you keep pushing it, your business is probably going to fail.
Yes. I so agree with that. And I think also too, like when you kind of think about that, right? It's like when you do dive into it and you do have the time and you don't have that strategy there that's sort of pointing you in that direction, right? Then you're just kind of like all over the place. You're maybe trying to do some thought leadership here. You're maybe trying to post a little bit there. Maybe you're like nagging on yourself because you're like, oh, I really wish I was like hanging out on LinkedIn more and talking about whatever, right? Maybe it's not LinkedIn, right? Maybe it's somewhere else. Actually, LinkedIn is pretty popular right now, though. So it may be LinkedIn, right? And so I agree. And I think that when I do the program in the one day, or when anyone does the program by the one day, right, you can bring people by your side, schedule that day out, and you're like, yes, let's do this together. Let's get it done. Maybe bring in your founding engineer. Maybe you bring in a couple early customers, or you do go out and you find some prospects to bring in. And so, you know, I know we're going to get into kind of the nitty gritty, but I do agree with you in that this is one of those things that especially I like to hang out with the nerd herd, which is like my target audience, right? These technical founders. I want to hang out with fellow developers. And the last thing that they want to do is think about marketing.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable sometimes. I think a lot of people suffer with it. Like I'm doing Adam Frankel's course right now, working through my own stuff, and
love it.
You know, I can just sit like at a screen and like, okay, I've been given a task to write a tweet every day, and it's like I just don't want to. There's something in me that's like, you know, I'm kind of, I don't know, it's uncomfortable. It's like you're trying to put out, like, it's hard. And it's not necessarily like, it sounds easy and it should be easy, but it's not often the stuff. And I feel like that's kind of the sort of thing that you're pushing is like, you know, rallying your friends or customers or like anyone that's your target audience and like getting them to come and give you feedback or like ask them what they care about, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Well, it's unnatural. It's like unnatural, right? To go out and feel like we're selling ourselves. So by the way, even though I'm great at selling other dev tools, quote unquote selling, horrible at doing my own marketing. So I completely resonate and relate. I'm in the same exact boat.
Yeah. It's I actually really think this is like it really boils down to like just doing uncomfortable things. Like that's what I don't know. It feels like that's really what you're helping people with, is doing those uncomfortable things, and or you know, or setting up, like pushing them to set a day aside and actually just work on it.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. And so like before they get to this day, what kind of stuff do they need to do in advance?
So I think kind of thinking about sort of the day, right? And maybe just like taking a little bit of a step back, there is objectives that we have set for the day. And so I want to kind of go through sort of the framework that I look at. And then I think that will guide and make that day a lot clearer. So when DevTools come in, and I know, again, we all know this, right? We've all been in this spot, right? We build a thing and we're like, this is the audience that wants the thing. And we pitch it to the audience and they're like, I don't want your thing. And you're like, what? I knew this was the audience. Like I knew in my gut this was right. Or maybe we get lucky and we pitch it to the audience and they love it and we're great. And we don't need to do things like this, right? But that's pretty few and far between. So
I think the other one is, they're just not the right person. They just don't get it. This must be like the wrong person. I need to just find the right people, which I think is the same issue. I don't know, even worse.
Actually, even worse, I do agree, because then you're like, okay, how many people should I talk to before I should invalidate this hypothesis, right? Which is a whole nother ballgame that we'll probably talk about soon here. Anyway, so it's always about like starting with the foundation of problem fit. And I call it problem fit. Everyone else calls it product market fit. I've seen like solution problem fit or problem solution fit, one of those versions. Either way, to me, it's a problem fit. You solve a problem, and that problem is a fit to some developer somewhere. And when we are to think about go to market, any marketing outreach, and in this case, it's a DevRel. And so I hate calling it marketing because it's not, but it is definitely a channel of marketing. And it's the channel that works for early stage DevTools. And so when you're thinking about sort of this fit, right, it has to be the foundation. It has to be at that bottom. You have to be deeply rooted in it. You have to know who has the problems that your DevTools solve. Like, what do those people look like, right? Like, so what is it that the pain point? What's the pain point or the problem that you solve generally? Okay. Who wants or has that pain point? But then from that, it can't just be who wants and has that pain point. It has to be who has the money and the willingness and the pain point that is like literally a thorn in their side to pay and actually adopt your dev tool. And so that's really like problem fit. And it sounds so straightforward, but it's not, because when you think about it, there's all these different sort of industries or use cases to think about. I just finished a sprint this week, actually, with a really super cool dev tool, Security as Code. I'm actually going to drop the name just because it's awesome. And we're actually doing DevRel Done For You together. So ArcJet is the name.
David Mitson.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's been on the show, actually. Yeah.
He has. And on top of it, we went through a whole consult, and I was like, oh my gosh, after the fact, realized he's council.dev. I'm like, I just talked to David and didn't know it.
He's a modest guy. Very nice guy.
So nice. I adore him. Anyway, so we're going through, right? And we're sort of thinking about like all these different angles. Like his product is just, first off, his developer experience is fire. I have never had a client come in and have that experience be so good. And so we really got to spend a great deal of time just like, okay, this versus that versus this, and really thinking about who needs his product the most. And we actually started narrowing it down, right? And oftentimes he is a great deflection for a really high Vercel bill, right? You're getting a bunch of bots, you're getting a bunch of different traffic that shouldn't be there, spamming, whatever it might be, right? And so, boop, apply ArcJet, and you're like, done. But Vercel's a partner. And so you have to be very tasteful about, we can't just go after this high Vercel bill, right? And so we had to think about who needs this actual tool and why do they need it? And so narrowing it down, right? We looked at e-com and new SaaS products and AI and ML. And AI and ML actually shined bright because they have to have cost reduction due to the GPU usage. Also aligns to other clients I'm working with. And so there's this beautiful synergy now that in this next 90 days, right, there's this duplicative work for my company, but also it's the biggest market opportunity for ArcJet, right? And so that's kind of that foundation, is we have to understand what and where we're going to go to market. And it isn't just, oh yeah, these devs need my tool. It's like, oh no, these devs have the thorn in their side that is my tool, and they need this solution, right? Yeah. Then sort of the next pillars is like, I think, everyone kind of is semi-familiar as we think about developers, but it's discoverability. Where are the devs? How do we get our stuff into their hands in a very authentic way? It's credibility. Like, credibility is so, so, so important. And I know that we all know that, right? When it comes to developers and dev tools, absolutely have to be credible and build that trust. Third piece is the aha moment, right? They have to see that aha moment, whether it be immediately on your homepage. They're like, yes, I'm trying this. This might be the solution for me. Or maybe it takes them a little bit, right? They find the aha in the docs. But whatever you have to do, it has to be as fast as possible that they reach that aha moment so that they begin to hit into that adoption, right? They need to adopt the tool, try it, hopefully give feedback if there's some sort of mismatch, and hopefully become a customer that then shifts into advocacy. And when I say advocacy, I'm not talking about a developer advocate. I'm not saying go hire a developer advocate. I'm saying serve your customers so well that they are your advocate. They go out and start talking about your tool. And they absolutely will. They will give you feedback. They'll build code samples. They'll build integrations. They will do a variety of things, right? Because they're like, yeah, I love this tool. It fits into my workflow. They're not trying to change my everyday workflow as a developer. They're plugging perfectly into everything that they know that I already use, and they're just delivering everything I need. And that's when you get customer advocacy. So the framework is all of that, right? And so when we go in and start thinking about the day, we are trying to ensure we've got that problem fit. And that requires research, right? If you have picked up Adam's book, which I know you have, I have, absolutely amazing book. Love it. Yes, exactly. I was like,
Got
it's
it
right.
Hold
it's
it
right.
for the podcast. I'm holding the book.
Video. I can't do it. It's right there somewhere. Anyways, absolute amazing book. And if you have read that book, which you haven't, go get it. You need it. Anyone who's a DevTool founder needs it. If you've read that book, he talks about tabs, right? Technical advisory boards. I've always called them developer advisory boards. I go back and forth because I'm like, should I just follow Adam's like synergy here since there's a book out and now we can all follow the same path? But I'm trying to retrain my brain to call them tabs.
So yours is dab.
And mine's Dab, and he's Tab.
Isn't that the dance? Like I'm way too old for this, but is there like
exactly.
is there something? I don't. You should dance when you.
Yeah, I know, right? The Dab. Okay, I'm going to switch it to a Tab. No.
Okay.
Anyways, if you've read the book, you know that you have to talk to your developers. So in order for us to define that problem fit, it isn't just me and the founder. It isn't just the founder, right? You can't just say, I'm going to define my problem fit. You have to talk to, I think that Adam says like 50 developers that are your prospects by the end of all of your interviewing. It's not a small amount. Because exactly what I just said about the foundation, right, is like you have to understand their workflow, understand everything that they do day to day. How do you plug into that? You don't want to change that. You can't be like, oh, you can no longer use GitHub or you can no longer use, your favorite IDE, right? Like you can't be messing with the dev sitch, but you have to come in and figure out how do we come into that? And what is that actual pain point? Like one of my other clients, we had some assumptions that we were making. They're in the ML ops space. So we had some assumptions that we were making, and we were at an event and we got to chat with obviously a variety of different devs. Hallelujah to the great developer events. Those are awesome. We got to chat with them, right? And then all of a sudden we had this aha moment about a piece of their workflow that just, it wasn't quite convincing that the dev tool I was supporting was going to perfectly fit in there. And we're like, oh, yes, this is what we should shift so that we fit into that workflow. So preparation, talk to your developers, talk to your customers if you have them, talk to your prospects if you don't. You obviously have to make a hypothesis about who you think your prospects are. Start somewhere, just like Adam has in his book, and start to shift, right? Because you're going to learn, oh, I'm going this direction, or oh, I'm going that direction. And so you want to continue to follow that path and speak to your developers. For me, when I'm prepping for that sprint, I also, which hallelujah for AI and Claude specifically, I have a lot of prompts that I run in terms of, okay, here's the consult that I had with the client. And I make sure that I ask these very specific probing questions, like what's the state of your dev tool? What problem are you solving? Kind of the variety. Honestly, Adam has a lot of sort of the similar context of questions. I'm trying to sort of break it down. So that book is quite helpful in terms of how someone could think about that. And from that recorded consult and from the customer transcripts and from the prospect transcripts, I bring all of that through, and I've got like different prompt templates that I go through, and I'm like, hey, this is the scenario. Here's what I need to do. And I'm able to almost get what is sort of a hypothesis, right? I can get some research. I go out and I do my manual research with the devs, and then I come into a sprint with a hypothesis. And so really what goes into that prompting is just understanding like, what are those pain points? And it comes down to a strategy format that I have actually that's like, what's our mission? How do we win? Like, who is it that we're trying to win with? Like, what do we offer them, right? And then how do we actually go about winning? And so I bring that in to kind of get a hypothesis. That was a lot, but I felt like it was like, you got to have all the prep to understand how I look at building these types of programs out.
Yeah. So I guess like in a kind of like playing it back, so they need to just basically just line up like a lot of people who really have this like burning problem. Is that how you would?
Yes. If you haven't been doing that already, yes, that's absolutely what you need. Because what we go into it with like, okay, what are the potential use cases, right? How does that actually fit into thinking about the jobs to be done type of exercise, right? A developer has a job to do. How can we come in, understand what that job is, and that leads into that use case. And so talking to the prospects, talking to your customers, kind of talking to any developers that are going to give you that information is going to give you the intel you need to start to understand what are the jobs that need to be done that you might fit into, and how does that turn into a use case.
Yeah. And what would you say is like the minimum, like if someone had to like MVP this, like what would you say is like the minimum that they should be coming in with?
Well, that's a good question. How good of an interviewer are they in terms of can they prompt to get the right details out? Because that's what it comes down to, which I have a blog post on that, by the way, that is customer questions and prospect questions. Some insights from Adam and his book, which also came, other insights that have come from other customer-led books. There's definitely some methodologies out there where they all sort of have the same agreements in how we ask customers questions. And so I think that matters. The questions that you're asking matter, and how you're sort of following up into those questions. I think if I could give any sort of instillment there is like, you have to absolutely understand their workflow from the beginning to the end. What are they starting with? What are they ending with? What are the tools that are coming in between? What are the pain points that they're feeling in between? What are sort of those little intricate things that you maybe don't think about? Like, oh, actually they have to go from this tool to that tool to this thing, because that's like obviously a pain and maybe they haven't seen the pain yet. So I think number of interviews depends on quality of interviews, but Adam says 50 and I don't disagree. The more you can do, the better. MVP would say 5 to 10 to sit and go through the rest of the day. Yeah.
And I would say just on my own thing of doing it now is like, I've been struggling to book as many as some of the other people doing Adam's stuff because I'm doing it on my own. That's a bad excuse, but it's the truth. Is that I am struggling. And even doing, even in like one, when you do one, you learn a lot. And I learned a lot from the first one that I did, and I need to do more. And I have like more lined up, but I feel like people shouldn't put up too much of a blocker of like just getting started, because I think even one is a lot better than zero.
I fully agree. I think if you have customers, those should be weighted heavier because your customers are using your tool. And so those are far more important. Yeah. If you don't have customers, then obviously you're leaning on prospects only. And I think if you're leaning on prospects, you need at least 10 because of the example I shared with you, right? In terms of the ML ops case, it was like we had talked to a lot of customers, but there was just a customer that came in and we're like, okay, this is actually a use case that falls into a future target audience that we've sort of projected. We need to understand this problem because it can potentially in the future need a different approach or a different feature set to actually go about this type of solution. So I think that when you look at it that way, of course, it's very easy to push it off. But I think at the end of the day, like, write the email template, right? That's like the quick template. Hey, I want to chat about the tool. Make your list of people that you actually want to reach out to. Create a Calendly or SavvyCal. I'm going to say SavvyCal another time, SavvyCal 1/3 time because I love SavvyCal.
You like it?
Okay. Make your calendar link for people to book with you and just make it a specific day, right? Maybe it's a day that like is chiller, or maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to get in the headspace where Friday afternoons are my social day. It'll, energize me to like, think about how to change or shift. I don't know if that's whatever, right? Find your timing for that calendar and just put it out there and just send them messages, because then they'll just start to schedule it on their own, right? And so you've done the work. You don't have to have any more pressure on you. And when they show up in your calendar, be ready, have your questions ready and absorb it, right? And then when you feel like you've got enough, then dive into the sprint idea of bringing all this work together.
Yeah. And maybe we could go to the sprint and kind of talk about exactly what like a day might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So just, if you were to, obviously what we're kind of referring to here is like coming together for a single day to build out this DevRel strategy for the next 90 days. And so, yes, next 90 days feels like, well, that's not very much time. But what you just said, right? We can't even dedicate time to customer feedback. So it needs to be short and focused and objective driven, right? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? So when I bring these sprints together, the beginning of it is that hypothesis that I talked about, right? What do we think is that target audience? Who do we think is willing to pay for the tool? What do we think the problems are that we solve with our tool? And that turns into kind of an exercise. And honestly, it's so fun. Like, this is one of my favorite parts, is because it's like, well, what else could we do? what other problem could we solve with the same tool or feature set that is a different set of developers or a different audience, right? And then we get kind of big pie in the sky, dreamy, because that's what's fun about being a developer is how do we solve this problem? And if we're thinking about how we built something that solves a problem, but how we can morph that into a solution for different types of devs is a whole fun ideation like game, right? So we go through and we're working through, the different ideation, what are these potential use cases? And then we have to get serious, right? We have to start making decisions. And really, this is me just sort of like pushing them to like have to make decisions because eventually we're going to make a decision on one single use case. And most founders are like, no, I need a huge total addressable market. Please don't take me down to a 5K market. And I'm like, yes, just do it. Just take the leap because they're focused, right? And so I'm prepping them for this decision that they have to make in a little bit. And so as we go through it, then we're narrowing down, okay, yes, this is beautiful. This is a great dream, but what do we actually want to accomplish? And so with one dev tool, we were talking about this, and it ended up being that a front end language was like absolutely going to be sort of this tech stack and situation was going to fall into a front end type of a developer persona. However, his knowledge, examples, guides, docs, kind of everything was all built for a back-end audience. So even though we saw this amazing market opportunity, we didn't choose that or prioritize that because of the amount of effort it was going to take to actually come up to par, have credibility, and have them reach that aha moment. And so instead, we're like, no, actually, let's niche into a very specific part of the back-end programming where we can solve this problem in a very niche way, if that makes sense.
Because flipping it would be a lot of work.
Yeah,
because
more docs,
the credibility.
Yeah, you don't have the integration partners. You don't have the developers. Hopefully, DevTools got quotes from their developers and different sort of those aha credibility moments that I talked to, right? And if it's from a backend dev and you've got backend examples, right? As a front end dev, you come in and you're like, I don't belong here. These are not my people. This is not my stuff, right? So you can't fundamentally completely shift. Then we review all that feedback, right? So we're like, okay, what did we hear from prospects? What did we hear from customers? If I'm going through and helping them review that feedback, I've got sort of a methodology and trend that I go through with that, with the jobs to be done exercise, if anyone's ever heard of that. You're doing a lot of like motivation, struggles, desired outcomes, right? You're really taking that story and trying to bring it down into those 3 columns. And then those motivations, those desired outcomes, and those struggles really show you, oh, there's some overlap here. Yes. Okay, these customers align, these prospects align. Nope, this doesn't align. Is this an outlier that makes sense? Or did we interview someone that didn't align with what we thought? And so we go through that feedback and sort of the results of all of that. If I'm actually facilitating it, I have different groups of prospects of developers that I will go and do the interviews for my clients. And so then we'll bring all of that in. And so I have them do the full video, screen record, all the things. And then from that, they've already got sort of a gut feeling, right? I've got a gut feeling. They've got a gut feeling. We're all kind of like going towards that gut feeling. And then we're like, okay, great. From all this information, we've defined maybe 1 or 2 jobs to be done, or we've didn't have to do the jobs to be done. And it was already so clear to us that these are sort of the use cases, which was the ArcJet scenario. Cause like David is so awesome. Like seriously, like his product is just so good. The experience is so good. That like we didn't have to do a lot of that stuff. It was really clear, those use cases. And so then we're sitting here with, 3 to 4 different use cases. Okay, we could use it in AI or ML, or we could use it in e-com, or we could use it in new SaaS products, or, for different clients, like, oh, we can use it with, front-end devs versus these different types of devs, right? And so then it's like, where is the tool already best suited to serve? And then that's where we land, right? Or where's this biggest opportunity? And so that's like the first half of the sprint is just like understand the customers, the prospect, the opportunities. What could we do? Who could we go after? What does our tool best serve? And then by the end of that first half of it, you should be like, this is the use case that we best serve. This is the audience we're going after. We know that these people are willing to pay us because we've understood that they have this pain point so bad that it's a thorn in their side that they're willing to pay to fix.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's like you mentioned, like gut feel, and it's I think there is like so much information from speaking with people, and like it's like you see the stress. Like for me, going through like the first tab call that I did, it was like, so the guy was like, I tried to do it and I just couldn't do it. And I guess it was difficult. It was difficult. I guess I just couldn't do it. And it was like, this thing is interesting because it's like, you can see that. I feel like it should become, as you mentioned, it's like the gut feel. It's like, hopefully the stuff just becomes obvious and you don't need to do some clever analysis or like run it through, it's just, it appears.
Yes. If it doesn't appear, you haven't interviewed enough people. That's essentially where it gets down to, is if your gut isn't like, oh, okay, like there's almost conviction around a feature pivot or having a conversation with your co-founder or whatever it might be, right? If none of those things are triggered, you haven't talked to enough people.
Yeah. It's it's really cool.
Yeah.
Talk to people.
I agree. Talk to your developers, like the Twilio book.
Talk to your developers. Yeah.
Actually, I think it's ask your developers, but still, same thing, right?
Yeah, I need to read that actually. Have you read that?
I haven't read it either, honestly, which I have it on my bookshelf with all the other awesome books, and I've pulled a couple pieces from it. I'm kind of a freak of nature when it comes to books, and like this is a gift that I'm so thankful for, but I can like scan through a book and even just look through the table of contents and like sort of be like, oh, I understand what framework they're doing here. Oh, that makes sense. Then like maybe do like the scan to see sort of quotes and whatever. And then I'm like, okay, I've got the gist of it, and I'll put it back on my shelf for a while. Like it doesn't mean I understood it, but it's like sometimes I just need to push in the right direction. I need a framework, or I need to see how someone else did it. And then it's like, then I can, bring it in. So that's what happened with that book.
Yeah. That's a very, very great skill.
It is, huh? It is.
Yeah. I keep thinking of making like an episode or something where I just like try and just distill, like, because I struggle to read all these things. It's especially when you're trying to do all this stuff, like your brain gets so frazzled with like social media and stuff. It's so hard to actually like focus on these things, I find anyway.
Yes, I agree. But I think that's the best part of like the second half of the sprint, right? If someone were to want to go in and do it themselves, it's like now they like have this beautiful, clear picture, right? Of like this use case. And now they're like, oh, I know what industry I'm hanging out in. I know what my developer might look and feel like, right? In terms of a persona. And it just gives you that clarity because like, that's why, right? That's why we all feel so frazzled, because we're like, I think I need to read this and that and do this and do that and do all the things, because it's like, we just think we have to do all the things, and maybe we do a little bit, right? But I think that oftentimes, and my coach literally just told me this yesterday, which is so embarrassing because this is what I help DevTool founders do, is he's like, essentially was like, do you have your own business strategy? And I'm like, well, of course not. Why would I be smart enough to build my own strategy? I do it for other people. And so I had a beautiful revelation of like, no, like literally, and that's the impact of the one-day sprint, right? Is that we all feel like we're stretched so thin, and it's like, no, stop, focus. What is it that we're trying to do? What are we trying to do to win, right? Like the thing, let's just stay on focus.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think we're coming towards the end, but would you be able to give us kind of like okay, these are the takeaways, like if someone's sat at home, doing a washing up, what do you want the founders to know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share just a couple quick things on the latter half of the day, right? Because once you find that use case, there's just a couple more things that we do to kind of fit into that day and absolutely like wrap it all up. Once we know that use case, we have to go be that developer, right? Like we have to either go find that developer or we have to go be that developer. And so if like it's an AI or an ML type of a use case, it's like, what is that flow? And so we put that hat on of that developer and we go in and we do that audit, right? If you're not facilitating the sprint with me, right? Go find those prospect developers, which ones were eager, which ones were excited, ask them to go through and do this developer experience audit. And essentially it's really just, what is the use case that you defined? What is it that they're trying to get done, that job they're trying to do? And have them go through and use your tool to do that job. It's basically them bringing their tool in and adopting it, right? But like It's from an audit standpoint where they're recording, they're screen recording, they're like commentating as they go, they're building, they're like, oh crap, I don't have this, I have to go find this, and you're watching them. And it is so enlightening as a founder to watch someone else actually try to use your tool, because you think that you understand and you see it because you're in it every single day and you're using it all the time. But we're using it as like ourselves. We're not using it as the developer. And so doing that is like so imperative to like watch someone else use your tool. Once we do that, then we know the developer experience and where that stands, right? Because sometimes we're going to spend the first sprint I do with clients, it might be all developer experience improvements. And then we shift to marketing approach, right? Because maybe the developer experience isn't there. There's no credibility. So when they come to the website, they don't trust you and they don't find that aha moment. And that absolutely has to be fixed first before we can do discoverability, right? They need to adopt when they come there. You don't want to lose them. And once we understand that, we understand where the experience is, then we build that strategy. So what's happening in the next 90 days? Are we improving developer experience? Are we building towards that aha moment? Or is it like, yes, that's great, we're going to hit the ground running. We are doing discoverability, which means hanging out where the devs are, pushing the thought leadership that's authentic, bringing the content to the people, right? Where are our people and how do we hang out with them? Where's those developer channels? And really, when I say developer channel, this can be an in-person event, a virtual event, Reddit, a super tiny niche Discord community. It could be a WhatsApp discussion between 5 devs, right? You're like, let me get into that network. Those are the developer channels. And so we make sure that whatever objective they're looking for, that strategy is built in a way that's going to drive them towards that next 90 days of getting that done. So with all of that to say, in summary, what I have built has taken me like 7 to 8 months to perfect in terms of how do I deliver this to founders? How do I deliver this to the dev tools that need it? But it's been things I've been doing for years, right? Just years and years. And I think that, when we take and distill sort of all of what DevRel is and what it can be and how developers want to be marketed to, I personally feel like developers are the most simple people, right? We want to learn and we want to be like, I built that. Give us the chance to learn. Give us the chance to say, I built that, and just understand, right? When you understand those users, you understand the pain point, you're hanging with the nerd herd, which is my goal in life. Then you know exactly what to build them and how to build that. And so I think more than anything, it's, if I could sort of TLDR it, I've got a playbook that I put out there that will give you sort of the fundamentals, the foundation. How do you go about approaching developers? What does that look like in building out this problem fit pillar and these other 4 boxes? And from there, I feel like folks will be like, oh, this makes sense, right? I understand why she chose those 4 boxes, why that's the framework. And how do I start filling in that framework? Because what you want to get to is that quadrant that is the advocacy. You want your customers making your dev tool better, right? You want your customers telling other devs in these backend WhatsApp messages like, have you tried this tool? Have you built with this thing? And the only way to do that is to do the other 3 really, really well.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Tessa. That was great. And thanks everyone for listening.
Happy to be here.